Hey everyone, and welcome to Liquid Liner Notes, a podcast that brings you interviews from the beverage and music industries. I'm your host, Danny, aka Hip Hops on Instagram. For this week's episode, I have Emily McGill, lead singer and mastermind behind the Milou Moon project. Emily, thank you for taking the time to meet with me.
Thanks so much for having me, Danny. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so we've known each other for a little bit. I won't go in too much detail, but we've known each other for a little while. But I wanted to talk to you about your music project and sort of like where you started with your interest in music and playing music.
Yeah, I think like a lot of musicians, it goes back to when I was very small, but I always loved listening to music. And then when I was probably 10, I started taking guitar lessons, mainly because I just like hated physical activity. And my parents tried to get me to do everything else and nothing else would stick. And then I was like, oh, music's cool.
Yeah.
So then just, yeah, I started playing guitar, joined this really funny music school in Chicago called School of Rock, where we would like learn classic rock covers and like play a bunch of Frank Zappa and like Zeppelin and Sabbath and stuff just in bars at the
Oh,
age of
yeah.
12. It was actually hilarious. It was really, really fun. But like through that, I just was like connected to so many musicians in Chicago and like started playing in bands and stuff. And I always loved like writing music, but I think it was kind of I don't know, it was almost something that I kept to myself for a long time
Mhm.
because as I went through like high school and college, I focused more on especially college and beyond, like just traveling and my other kind of creative interests, which are like in the visual art space and like painting and pottery. And I was kind of just getting to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And I think post college and like getting to Australia and living here and being kind of really immersed in the music scene here and having so many friends in music, and just being surrounded by like an incredible psych rock scene, which is kind of the genre that I tend to dabble in with this project,
Yeah.
was just super inspiring. And then, yeah, during COVID, it just became pretty obvious that like this was the thing that I had been dancing around for so many years and just needed to finally just
Yeah. You
do.
had the time. Yeah, you had the
Yeah, I
time
had the time.
doing that.
Yeah, and also this sense of like, what am I doing? If I'm not doing music, like why? Like it was
Yeah.
almost kind of just this like fear thing that I hadn't even realized I had of just not wanting to fail on some level. And I'm like, that's fucking
Yeah.
stupid. I'm just gonna play music.
Yeah.
Like I just love
The
it. So
the imposter syndrome kinda like
yeah,
getting in your own head and thing. I do
totally.
wanna go back
Yeah,
to
yeah.
the Midwest All-Stars,
Oh yeah, the
and,
mid
that
what
was,
a
like, the one
time.
little, like, tidbit I had, but you were, like, traveling the US and, like, hit a couple cities, like, traveling with that School of Rock group?
Yeah, so this is actually really fun and I think formative in probably like some of the ways that my parents were hoping it wasn't going to be because it's definitely like where I smoked weed for the first time and like all this stuff. But it was when I was probably 13. I was at School of Rock and they do this thing where like they basically gather up the best quote unquote like best kids from all the different schools across the country because there's like one in a bunch of different cities and then gather them all up in Austin, Texas, spend like 2 weeks just like practicing and jamming and whatever. And then we literally all got on like a massive tour bus and toured, I think it was probably like 10 cities.
That's crazy
And
as
it
for a
was so
thirteen-year-old.
fun. I know. I was like the youngest person in that tour and ended up just having like the best time ever, but also discovered losing my voice from partying.
Oh, and
Because
then you have a big show the next day, and it's,
yeah, if
yeah,
Big Show is, like, playing at a bar in Kansas City, like, playing a bunch of Led Zeppelin and Yes covers, but honestly, yeah, that was an awesome experience, and still, like, a bunch of the people that I did that with are professional touring musicians now and,
nice.
like, went on to do amazing stuff, so it definitely, like, was a percolator for a lot of really talented people.
That's really cool. So you kinda mentioned some of this classic rock stuff you were doing with the School of Rock, but I just wanted to
Mhm.
know maybe what your musical inspirations were when you were a kid, and then maybe, like, now, like, as you got a little bit older, like, how that maybe progressed.
Yeah, I think growing up, I was probably pretty influenced by my dad's taste in music, which was a lot of like classic rock and yacht rock and that kind of stuff. But then I started branching off into some of the classic rock avenues that he didn't listen to as much, which was in the more kind of psychedelic, kind of like Hendrix, Pink Floyd. Like I always just loved music that would take me on a journey.
Yeah.
And it was more to do with the soundscapes and the textures and the feeling than it was about like the lyrics. Like I was never really into like Bob Dylan or like folk artists that felt like they were more just like telling a story, which I find really beautiful and awesome. But yeah, the stuff that really was a major influence was the stuff that like I loved like prog rock, like Yes and Rush and stuff in my
Yeah.
nerdier times. But um and in a
Kind of
lot of
like
ways there's
cinematic.
yeah, there's actually still, I would say, like a lot of that stuff that I still vibe with hard. Um, but it's probably shifted into just like a more diverse range of influences that all like on some level share that like atmospheric, textural, like the band Air. I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
like a pretty mainstream influence at this point would be like Tame Impala and the sort of whole psych scene around them, like Pond and King Giz and all of that stuff. Like I love that world. Then there's just a lot of other cool bands that are starting to do it with like more female fronted kind of stuff like Crumb and Melody's
Mhm.
Echo Chamber. Hannah Cohen is a really dope artist in the States. So yeah, there's just like a ton of stuff that feels like it has those components for me that like is probably my biggest influence.
Yeah, no, I like that. It's a good mix, and yeah, like telling to where how you sound now, which we'll jump into the Milou Moon stuff. But first, I got to ask where the name came from.
Yeah, so thank you for asking because I feel like, and also you're saying it right. I get a lot of different pronunciations of it.
What's the
Um,
worst one you've gotten?
I think Millau.
Oh, wow.
That one just felt like it didn't feel right in the mouth. I'm like, whoa, Millau. But no, yeah, Milou Moon is so Milou is like my nickname in French basically because I'm like my family's half French and I grew up kind of bilingual, speaking French, going to French school. So in French, if you're Emily, you often become Emilou, and then that
Mm,
becomes Milou. So yeah, it was kind of my nickname that even like pretty much all my family would call me. My friends never called me that, but I just thought it was, I don't know how I ended up throwing it into my band name. I was just like, this is kind of cute in French. And
yeah.
then my first ever kind of like solo project that I never actually released anything on, but on iTunes, if you go back to my early recordings, it's all under the name Honeymoon. So I was just
Honeymoon.
kind of like doing this little combination of like the new and the old.
I like
Yeah.
that. And what kind of stuff was that?
Basically stuff that was just trying to be like a rip-off of The Strokes. Because yeah,
Oh,
like I didn't mention some of my earlier other influences that were less on the prog tip and more on just the kind of like indie
garage
garage
band,
tip.
indie.
And yeah,
Yeah.
like I was super obsessed with The Strokes and Julian Casablancas' songwriting. And yeah, I still like feel I still will occasionally actually pull a little melody from one of those like early demos, but the actual
Mhm.
recordings are really so gnarly. It sounds like a megaphone effect on everything and then just like really out of time. Like, yeah.
Love it. Um, so we've kind of been talking about like the sound of the project, psychedelic, a little rock, and even kind of like I don't know if anyone's told this before, but it's kind of like reminiscent of like '90s alternative and
Mm, like
like
garbage kind
a
of thing.
yes,
Yeah.
garbage. That was the
I
exact
love
band I was gonna
garbage.
say.
I
Yeah, and I feel
totally
like you
like
kind of
grew up
have
listening to them.
a similar. You have a similar vocal like cadence or something. I don't know what it is, but
Awesome.
something reminded me of it. So I
Sick.
liked
I
it.
will, that's a great compliment. I love them. And like I think it's interesting. I think some of the newer stuff is probably shifting a little bit further away from like some of the rock elements,
Mhm. but
but I still think, especially for the live show, like there's just something really fun about rocking the fuck out.
yeah, yeah. And so you sing and you play guitar. We've kind of gone over, but do you have any other like instruments in your bag that you like to dabble with?
I definitely dabble with like synth and keys. I actually, for a while, like played keys in my friend's band, but was not actually a keyboard player. So I had like the letters like stuck onto the keys. Did eventually basically learn music theory on the piano, but now I mainly just use like a MIDI synth
Oh,
thing to like add stuff to my recordings. And oftentimes like they will still end up in the final recording, but I have bandmates and collaborators who have like legitimate synth like dungeons where we then kind
Yeah.
of create stuff together. But yes, I think that's the kind of main other thing I would dabble with. But yeah, on the first record, I did play bass as well,
Hmm.
which I don't do on this one.
Yeah.
So I've
Okay.
outsourced. I basically
Yeah.
just don't want to have to play all the instruments, and like I like having other people's kind of instrumental voices on there too.
Yeah. I like that. So I know this is maybe a little out of order, but just to talk about your move to Australia
Mm,
and just I thought it was interesting, like interviewing you, a because you're like an artist who's like newer in the game in a way,
mm, totally.
and you also moved across the world and are doing this, in not your home country. So it just like adds an extra element of interest to me. And so, like, I guess, yeah, when did you move to Australia?
Well, I came out here, it was like right at the end of 2016, like just in time for New Year's. So it's been over 8 years, which is wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you move straight to Melbourne?
I did, yeah. So I like my partner's from Melbourne. So I came out here and like just immediately was welcomed into just the coolest friend group. And so many of those people I'm still really tight with now, but I feel like it was just immediately this like super immersive creative community. And I don't know, I think that's probably why I've stayed. I think that not that I didn't have that in Chicago, but there's something about like going away from home and kind of experiencing things in a new place where you just almost see it more clearly.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I
Yeah.
ended up just staying here for 8 years.
No, I mean, I like it. It's kinda like, I don't know, it feels like you do kinda have to, like, get out of your hometown, even a hometown as large as Chicago, to kinda
Yeah,
see things in a different way.
yeah, and now I see Chicago totally differently too, like in a much more positive light, I think, than if I were to have just stayed. But um, yeah, it's kind of cool to be able to do music in both places now. I always
Yeah,
thought it was going to be a hindrance, but it's
yeah,
kind of
I mean,
not.
yeah. I do wanna ask, so, and I might be pronouncing this incorrectly, Naarm?
Yeah,
Is that how you say it?
Naarm.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's
for
the
someone who's
indigenous
like,
like name for Melbourne.
okay, I was gonna say somebody, I looked it up, so I kinda knew, but I just was
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
who's
yeah.
immersed in it, like, how important that is to, everyone there, kinda thing, if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there's just so much more awareness around um, indigenous names and indigenous culture here now.
Yeah.
Probably a lot more than like I ever noticed in the States. Like it just feels like there's a more commonplace awareness and acknowledgement of it here, which I think is really cool. And I think, yeah, you often get it kind of shown side by side because obviously a lot of people overseas like don't recognize those names.
Mhm.
But yeah, I kind of always try to just include it at least in like a written format, just
Yeah.
as like it's just an acknowledgement, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah, like a nod. I like that because, I mean, Chicago is an indigenous word for, like, smelly
totally.
onion or whatever.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
just
And
like,
that's
but
so
nobody thinks of it
true.
that way.
Yeah, that's so true. And I feel like in some ways, maybe because Melbourne has this clearly very like colonial name that's like
Yeah,
not informed by the indigenous name for the place, then they kind of have been shifting more towards it. But yeah, you're right. Chicago like already was.
yeah, yeah, no,
Smelly
I
onion,
like
so
it.
true. I
So,
love it.
uh, I know we've kinda talked about this a little bit as far as, like, how moving to Melbourne, impacted your sound and, like, the psych scene there, but maybe if
Mm,
you could just talk a little bit about the music scene in Chicago versus Melbourne, and
yeah,
things you've noticed being in both areas.
totally. I think about this a ton. I feel like in Melbourne, there's like a heavier electronic influence that I notice because, and I don't know if this is just because of my friend group, but I was definitely ushered into a friend group here that loves going to festivals. They call like they call kind of predominantly electronic festivals here bush doofs, and it's basically like you go out into the forest and there's like a generator and it's kind of like a rave, but you're in the gum
Mhm,
trees and whatever. So I feel like that culture definitely influences a lot of the bands as well because it's sort of this thing of like there's kind of like a groove component that I feel running
mhm,
through a lot of the music in my particular kind of group of friends. And a lot of it's like music that would go really well, like daytime at a festival and, things that people can kind of just like chill out to. Whereas I think in Chicago, there's maybe more. I mean, this is probably obvious, but I do think that there is like a lot more Americana flavor
Yeah.
in a lot of my friends' bands. And I don't necessarily see my two groups of friends as like parallels, but in a lot of ways, it's like I do see them as being kind of cool, like young musician groups in both cities. And so, like the Chicago people, there's a lot of stuff that is cool there that like would not
Yeah.
be cool here at all, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Um, and like, yeah, it's
I
more
get that.
focused on like, I don't know, just more, maybe a little bit more like earnest songwriting. There's often like lap steel and pedal steel and stuff, which I find really cool. And I'm like trying to kind of bring over here a little bit more. And um, yeah, it's just, it's a little bit less of that kind of like dance music culture embedded into stuff. I think that's probably one of the
Mhm.
biggest differences.
Yeah, and so, do you find yourself sort of like taking from both scenes and when you are creating?
Yeah, I really try to. I mean, I think as much as I can, I try to just not think of any type of scenes and just like pull the music from inside myself and like trust that whatever's coming up organically is like a combination of all of my influences and stuff. But because I do think it can be, I don't know, the feeling of wanting to like fit into a scene, I can find really like stifling. I feel like I really just don't actually care that much about that and really just want to make music that I like. And
Mhm.
I think most of the music that I like listening to is probably coming from a similar place because you can tell when things feel like they really fit the scene, but like it's not really that interesting or unique.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hoping to bring some of those influences in, but I'm not sure if it will fit into any of the scenes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's all good. I mean, everyone kinda has to, like, create from their background in some way or
Yeah,
another, either
yeah,
avoiding it or eating or like, taking from it.
yeah.
So the next question I was gonna ask is, like, when you moved there, you kinda hinted at having a friend group because of your partner, but, how did you find bandmates and people that you wanted to create with? Was that
Mm.
pretty easy to do, I guess, since you had the friend group established?
In some ways, yes, but I also was being really picky, which I just knew that I had to be because I wanted them to be people that I like A really wanted to spend a lot of time with and was homies with, but then also were really fucking awesome musicians because I don't know, like I kind of feel like you want to be the weakest link in your own band. Like you kind of want to be surrounded by people who really got this. And I
Yeah.
think the people that I ended up with here are 100% that. And they just like, a lot of them have been in a bunch of different bands and are super familiar with all of the tech stuff and like the shit that I don't have my head so like wrapped around. But a lot of them, so one of them was actually like a friend that I wasn't like close with, but was my next door neighbor while I was looking for a bassist. And I was like, wait, you play music? And then he has turned out to be like such an amazing bassist, my friend Javon. Um, George, my drummer, I had been like close friends with for a few years, and like we, you know bonded over first thing we bonded over with was our love of like sour gummies and just our
Oh.
hatred of like sour gummies that aren't that sour but pretend they are. And then like eventually he was the person who like when I first was thinking about putting a band together, I just sent him a demo and I was like, I think I want to put a band together, and he was like, I'm in. And it was
Yeah.
just the two of us for probably like 2 or 3 months, literally just
Yeah.
practicing. Like it was like a Black Keys type thing. Like I was just on
Yeah.
guitar and singing, and he was playing drums. And then like we started adding people. So we added Javon on bass, and then Sam, my guitarist, who also plays synth. He's kind of like a double whammy.
Mhm.
I just met through a friend because he was doing sound at like this rave, lol. And then um, didn't see for a long time, but then was looking for someone. And actually, the first time he said yes, we like got him into the band. And then like a few days later, it was just like, I'm so sorry, I actually don't have the capacity for this. And then months went by, and then I kind of just had stopped looking because I was finishing my master's and just was like, all right, I just need to like take a breather. I thought I had a band, but now fuck, it's back to the drawing board. And then I just asked him again like a couple months later, and he was like, actually, yeah, I really want to do that. And he's become like one of my best friends. So, yeah, I really feel lucky because I, I mean, now after being in the music scene here, even for just like a couple years, if I was to put a band together from scratch, it'd be so easy. But like, I wasn't really, as much as I was in Melbourne and in like, this friend group, it was still a little bit of work to put together a band. So yeah, but I'm stoked with I love my band so much. And then now we have this new keys player, Lockie, so we're 5 people. And he
Oh
brings
wow.
like the jazzy sort of like super music theory component to it where I'll just be like playing a chord. I'm like, Lockie, what is this? And just
Yeah.
immediately he's like, F sharp. And I'm like, well,
Yeah, he just
F
knows it.
sharp I'd probably know, but any of this kind of like jazzy chords, I'm like, what is this? Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. So we'll kind of go into I feel like that's a good segue into your first album, uh
Mm,
Trails to Center.
hmm.
And that came out in March 2024. And the
Yes.
reason I say it's a good segue is because you hinted at it earlier, but you recorded much of that solo, and
Yep.
then kind of did you have them, the three guys you mentioned, kind of like come in post and like re-record some things, or how did that work out?
Yeah, well, so for the drums, I basically just like recorded I just like recorded the demos using like a Logic drummer thing.
Oh,
So it was a
okay.
mix of like the just Logic drummer presets that I would then like edit, like turn into a MIDI thing and then edit. And then because I just was like, I'm not gonna put Logic drums on this released record, I got George, my drummer, to actually just record the drums over the tracks that were basically already finished, which is super badass. Where it's like, I mean, look, there's no one way of doing things, and I'm really all
Yeah.
about like no rules to recording, but it does tend to be easier to build off a track that has drums because then all the rest of everything is like in time to that.
Yeah, you have the
So it's a lot
rhythm,
of
yeah.
pressure on the drummer to be like, now play perfectly to this song. But yeah, he did a great job. And other than that, though, there was one track that like I recorded parts of it in Chicago with my friend Duncan, and he recorded bass and synth on it. But pretty much everything else, like, actually, now I'm thinking about it, another friend, my friend Mitch in Australia, who plays or like used to play in this band called Northeast Party House, did guitar on Drawn In and the lead guitar
Mhm.
on Reflection. So I had people like sit in for little things, but yeah, to be honest, most of it was just like me recording it, yeah, at my house and doing like a million takes to get it
Yeah.
perfect and whatever. But it
I was gonna
doesn't.
ask how long that kinda took you, because if you don't have things to bounce off people necessarily,
Mm,
especially during quarantine, it can probably become
yeah,
a
I
your
mean,
own echo chamber.
for sure. And I think like with I don't know, the thing that people say about like the first album is that you kind of have your whole life to write it, and then like the second one is however long from the first album, because I was working on those songs for like they were just sort of circling my brain for a while. Like a couple of them I had had in my mind for like a couple years
Mhm.
before even like recording them or writing them down because I didn't have a concept in mind yet for this project. But then when I started to be like, no, I want to do this, and I kind of feel like I'm going to group together the songs that feel the most like me and feel the most like what I want to release into the world. That's when I started really finessing them. But yeah, like some of the ideas for tracks, like I have early demos of Drawn In when it was still a song called Seascape, which I like recorded with some friends in their garage, and it sounds like punky as hell. It's just like do 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 like chuggy guitars and shit. Like I don't know, I should probably release that one day just as like a funny sort
Yeah.
of I don't know, I can even send
Bonus
it to you if
bonus
you want to
track.
put a sound bite in this. It could be kind of funny. A lot of them were percolating over a long period of time, and when I actually started recording them, it was probably like 6 months to
Mm.
where it was, like, mixed and mastered. But I
Yeah.
had a lot of,
That's not
like, fire in my belly once I was like, "I'm doing this."
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, yeah, inspiration, I guess, how did it come to you then? Like, when you were talking about you had those kinda in your head, maybe is that something that you see when you're just, like, out and about, or is it events that happen to you and you're like, I want to write a song about this? How does that hit you?
It's kind of a mix. I mean, I definitely subscribe to the school of like, um, don't wait to be inspired, work to be inspired. So sometimes it's not like I'm waiting for like downloads of just like, oh, all of a sudden I'm hearing this melody. But if I'm walking along in the neighborhood, just like, I don't know, I'll try to start humming melodies and just get my voice recorder app out and
Mhm.
just start kind of being like, oh, maybe this could be cool. And maybe none of it is good. Maybe it all sucks, but it's still kind of getting me thinking about melody. And I think I
Yeah.
often start from like a vocal melody, which will sometimes become a guitar thing or something. But like for example, that's how I came up with circles, at least like the hook for circles. I was just like walking along, I was like, dun, 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 running in circles in my mind. Dun, dun, to find blah, blah, blah. Like I was singing kind of like a simultaneous guitar part. And
Yeah.
so like there's literally voice memos of that, of like background noise, like street noise, walking, and me singing that. And then I don't know, like I actually really didn't like that song at all once I recorded it, like once I recorded a demo, and then just like a while later I showed it to my band, and then all of a sudden they loved it, and then the inspiration's back. So I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
there's just this thing of like ebbing and flowing. Um but yeah, I mean then also I'll come home from a gig if I've seen like a really good gig and I always want to write. Like,
It's super
or if I
inspired.
listen, yeah, or if I just like listen to, honestly, listening to music that I love and that I'm super inspired by is the number one, like, fastest way to get me writing. Even just like looking at a chord chart for a song that I think has really interesting chords and then just like reimagining them in a new way. That's
Mhm.
actually a trick I learned from Jeff Tweedy's book on songwriting, but it's
Oh,
very intuitive, like, that sense of just like, "Well, no one owns these chords, so I'm just gonna play with them because 'cause they're cool and I like them," and then usually something will come up, but yeah.
it's kind of like a cool. So, like in hip hop, how like there's sampling. Like it's kind of like
Mhm.
you're almost sampling like with
Yeah,
this like the chord chart, but
totally.
creating
Yeah,
something
you're
new
like
with it.
exactly, like, you're not starting from scratch, and I think in some ways, like, having some limitations is actually really freeing. Just being like, "Cool, I'm gonna just play around with, like, these 4 chords and
Yeah.
put them in a different order and just try a few different things, try a bunch of different melodies over the top," but it's, like, almost more freeing than just sitting down with your guitar and being like, "What the fuck am I gonna play?" I
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
play anything, like, you know?
Do you pretty much always, so I'm not musically inclined, I'll throw that out there. I don't play anything.
Well,
But
you're
is it kind
definitely
of like,
musically inclined, but maybe you
well,
just don't play an instrument.
I'm a fan. Yeah, I don't play I don't play an instrument. Is it kind of always you have this melody out first and then you're like, okay, I need to write lyrics to that melody, or and that like maybe the vibe of the melody leads your imagination into writing that?
Yeah.
Or
I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of the time I do write a melody first and then lyrics. Like, I was doing a writing session the other day with a couple friends, and um like they were kind of like we were sort of playing an instrumental and I would just kind of start like ad-libbing over the top of it vocally. And I just play around with that until I have a melody that I like, and then I would take the demos home and write lyrics to
Mhm.
that melody. Like, often I'll have some placeholder lyrics, like, I always do this thing where I say, like, "Running away," but I'm like, "Why the fuck am I running away?" Like, I'm not actually trying to write a song about that, but it's just kind of like lyrics are such a interesting one because it's not like poetry or literature in the sense that it's just about what you're saying, 'cause it also has to have, like, a shape in your mouth that feels
Mhm.
right for that tone of, the melody, and it follows the track, like, in a way that makes sense rhythmically and tonally, so I do try to, like, prioritize the melody and the feel over lyrics and
Yeah.
meaning, but then sometimes, like, with circles, like, that little thing I just sang before,
Yeah.
that melody came to me, like, with those lyrics,
Yeah.
and sometimes, like, the "placeholder lyrics," quote, unquote, end up actually being kinda cool, and so you'll, like, write a song that's kind of maybe inspired by those original, like, random lyrics that just popped into your head.
Yeah, and I liked, like, some I think, was it Drawn, which one was the one, it might have been Drawn In because it used to be called Seascape, and that might be why it's
Yeah.
coming to me. But that was like based on nature, and you
Yeah,
were
Drawn
I just
In,
I re-
to be honest, like, interestingly, I wrote 2 songs on that EP that were kind of about a natural place that I love. The Murray is about the Murray River, so it could also be that, but Drawn In, I, like, wrote about this place called Wilson's Promontory National Park that's, like, a few hours away from Melbourne, and that was just this, like, image that I kept in my mind when we were in lockdown here, because it was, like,
Mhm.
one of the freest moments of my life, just being at the top of this, like, beautiful mountain peak and looking out over, like, you could see both sides of the peninsula, so you could see, like, both bays, and it just, like, you know, the wind is in your hair, and it's just like a 17-kilometer hike to get there sort of thing, and during lockdown, when you're, like, can't leave more than, like, 5 kilometers from your house, I was just picturing being there, and so it was kind of just like
Yeah,
a yearning song of
yeah,
sorts.
I like it. And then you said you were in like a writing group. Did you kind of like try and set certain times and days where you're like, okay, I'm gonna work on music on every Tuesday at this time, or like
Mm.
how did how do you like
Um,
process that time wise?
I feel like it's pretty random, to be honest with, like, I kind of just I could be more routine with it, and I think maybe that would be good, but I try to kind of just like, if I am feeling inspired, I really try to go with that. Like, for example, when I got back to Chicago this past time, because I came back in November, I had like crazy jet lag for a few days because I never get it coming back to Australia, but coming back to Chicago, I'll wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m. for like a few days in a row. And I would
Hmm.
wake up and just have all these ideas for songs. And I'd just be like, all right, fuck it, we're up. Like, I would just get set up and like record for 4 hours because no one's
Yeah.
bothering me. And that's clearly not like scheduled at all, but it just felt right. So I did it. Whereas then there's other times, like for example, and this is very new to me, like writing with other people, but I've recently signed with a label and a publisher here in Australia, and they have, because like publishing is kind of all about like just writing music. So they've connected me with some awesome musicians around Melbourne who I now have been writing with and collaborating with, and it's been really, really fun. Like, because I'm getting to work with people who are kind of like my idols in some way.
Yeah.
Like I got to do a session the other day, like my friend Lee, who is an amazing drummer and is probably going to produce at least part of my like next thing, because we've got this EP, but then there'll be an album, like a full length album. Um, and he like, writes and plays drums for Angus and Julia Stone, a Dope Lemon, and then he brought in his friend Simon, who's the keyboard player for Hiatus Coyote. So we like had a full day of just doing like writing songs together, and I was like, this is fucking crazy, and felt
I
really
haven't really.
embarrassed when I like didn't play a B minor correctly the first time, so
Oh,
my fingers were like sweaty and it was so hot, and I was just like flustered, and I was like, oh god, they don't think I
that
can
is
play a B
awesome.
minor.
I love. I haven't followed them like recently, but Angus and Julia Stone, like I love
Mm,
a lot of their earlier stuff. So that's really cool.
totally.
I didn't realize they were
Well,
Australian.
Lee was probably involved with that in some way because he does a lot of
Yeah.
writing and like, yeah. But anyways, it's just kind of people that um I get to kind of connect with and write music with. It's just been really fun because it used to be such a solitary thing. Like as I said, the
Yeah.
first EP was sort of just like a thing that got born over however many months and me playing all the instruments and stuff. Whereas there's something cool about sitting down with someone and being like, what about this for the chorus? And
Hmm.
oftentimes like the combination of ideas together creates something even cooler. And I kind of love the
Yeah.
fact that it didn't all just come from my brain. Like I'm definitely not one of those musicians that's like, it has to be played like this. Like, with my band and stuff, I'm like, bring your sauce to this. Like I do not want to control like what you play. Obviously, like we're all playing this song together, so it has to sound good. But this feeling of like, no, it has to be exactly like this, I just think is
Yeah.
like, I don't know, just
That,
stifling for musicians.
yeah. And that adds a little like interest to it because it gives everyone to
Yeah.
give a little individuality.
Mm,
Which I'm glad you brought up the working with the label thing, and because that was kind of my next set of questions was like I know
true.
kind of had a little bit to do with two different labels at least now.
Mm.
Dolphin Love, which I don't know how like I was trying to do some research on them, and I didn't really see anything recently, so I don't know.
So,
But it seemed like
Dolphin
they
yeah,
helped out maybe.
yeah. Well, so Dolphin Love actually is just, like, this creation that 2 of my best friends put together, as and actually both of them used to be in a band, called Snackadactyl that, like, were pretty big in Australia, and, like, both of them work in the music industry and whatever, so they, like, genuinely wanted to have a label that would essentially kind of be like stepping stones for their friends to get to more official labels that might be able to kind of like give them more budget and stuff. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I mean, they didn't have like money to give me, which I feel like generally labels like that's the one of the main things that you get from them is like money to put towards like promoting your music and making your music. But they definitely did like have some great contacts and just advice and really like I think they were just kind of like mentors. But um yeah, then this label that I'm with now, Origin, um, they found me through my friend Nick, who fronts this band here called Deep Sea Arcade, who like we're actually going on tour with in March. But he just kind of he's like connected to that. He like they're his label as well and his publisher, and he just found my music and sent it to them, and they were super into it, and like that just kind of happened. So I definitely wasn't planning to look for a label, but it has been really nice. Like it's still, you know, I like the fact that it's not like a major label kind of thing because I don't have any
Yeah.
pressure on me to do like a particular timeline or like a particular vibe or like it just feels like completely free creative expression, but just like with a little bit more budget and also like great
Mhm.
mentors.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about your album artwork and the singles
Mm,
artwork. So your first album kinda had the sphere, and I noticed a lot of your singles, are kinda, like, ethereal looking, like, maybe based on
yeah,
nature a little bit. But I
yeah.
I just was curious, speaking about budget and everything, but, like, how did you come up with those? Like, did you have artists kinda help with that, like, to do
Mm.
your vision, or did you do that on your own?
So the EP artwork is a friend in Chicago, Emily Burliu, who's actually like an incredible graphic designer and has really like kind of skyrocketed into the Chicago scene. Um, and so she did that design, but all the other ones are basically just like photo edit things that I've done that are kind
Mhm.
of just like in the aesthetic wheelhouse of the project because I kind of just yeah, I think with budget and time, like, I just try not to fixate too hard on shit that I feel like not doesn't matter, but can be cool without needing to blow out your budget. Like, I don't need
Right.
to pay a graphic designer to do every piece of single art because most of the time, like, it's seen in, like, tiny format, especially, like, for
Yeah, yeah,
singles, like, it just needs to be, like, something that I feel carries the energy of the track somewhat and has some
yeah.
like personal meaning to me. But yeah, a lot of them are just like photos that I've taken that I like heavily edit
Mhm.
and have some meaning in the context of the song. But then, yeah, I think with the EP artwork, like for this next EP, that one's going to be more involved. But I did this one all myself with a photo that my friend took. So it actually, like, I'm really proud of it. And it's going to be on vinyl. So,
Uh, I remember
so
you
I,
posted about it, like, about should you do it, and so I
I'm
was
doing it.
I was interested to see. That's awesome. I'm
Yeah, I'm
excited. I'll
stoked.
be
I've just been finalizing all the art actually over the last like 2 days, so they're
yeah,
officially going to start making a test pressing.
that's awesome. I'll, be
Yeah,
on the pre-order for that.
sweet.
Um, I know, like, you were talking about doing that, and I know, like, I've read a lot about how you were using Photoshop and kinda learning Photoshop to do posters and stuff, and some of the other
Mm,
DIY things, like the music videos and stuff that you've created.
yeah.
I just wanted to know, like, how much that was you versus, like, having friends help out kinda
Mm.
thing.
I mean, to be honest, like the videos have been super collaborative. The first EP, we did like 3 out of the 4 tracks had like pretty professional by my standards videos that my friend Sini, who like Her name's Sini Pretty. She's like an incredible film producer and just really good friend of mine. And she was just like, let's do videos for your
Hmm.
EP. So we kind of had this idea of doing like a 30-second kind of visualizer or whatever for each track. And so we did do like a big shoot day where we had like did it all in one day, like the three different aesthetics and whatnot. Like it was really cool. We had like a lighting person and then a friend doing like set design and then this amazing camera person. And so that was like definitely the most official thing I've done, but it was also like kind of expensive. And
Yeah.
I mean like when I say kind of expensive, like people spend 10 grand to do like a 3-minute video. It was probably like 1,500 Australian dollars to do all that, but like for me to just be
Yeah.
paying that, I was just like, okay, I don't think I could do this for every fucking song. But and then the last track we just did like Sini and I on a camcorder, just like a big day of adventures and went to like the river and kind of captured the feeling of that track, the Murray, which is all about this river. And
Oh, is that at the Murray River, like the shoot?
unfortunately, we didn't
Oh,
actually go
I'm
to the
sorry.
Murray, but we did go to the Yarra. And like, funny enough, I actually posted about this the other day because I like found all this old footage from that shoot, and I was just like, full disclosure, this was at the Yarra, which is really close to where I am right now, actually. Um, but you know, people probably like they get the feeling of riverness from it, and that's
Yeah.
good enough for
Yeah, that's enough.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and this is probably on that same day, but the spin cycle video with like all
Mm.
the like fish bowls and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
Oh
What
yeah.
was
I
that
went
like?
in.
Did you guys?
Well, that honestly, so my friend Kat, who did set like design for that day, basically like had this idea to use all these bowls of water and shit. So I like went to a $2 shop and bought like $150 worth of just like glass containers. And then I just went back and returned them all afterwards, which was
Nice.
pretty great. But yeah, like it was, you know, it was DIY in the sense that like we did all of that like ourselves and mostly unpaid. But then it was like shot pretty professionally. And I
Yeah,
think
for
with
sure.
this EP, I think it's just becoming one of those things where, like, as I move through this like landscape of music industry stuff, I'm like, where do I want to put my like limited resources, energy, time? And I do think it's really cool to have like a visual component for every track, but I don't think it
Mhm.
needs to be like a professional in the studio, like HD music video. So I think I'm leaning a little bit more on like camcorder and like things that I splice together and create like trippy effects and whatever. Just like trying to play a little bit more with what I can do. Like for
Yeah,
circles, I made like that visualizer just using like
yeah,
Adobe Animate and some drawings I made. And it doesn't look that professional, but it's like something cool that you can just kind of like get lost in and I didn't have to pay any money for. So just trying to combine like my love of visual art and um, music and not have to like outsource everything.
yeah. No, I love that, and then I think that they're all seem to be well done. They get the point across, and I was making sure I watched them like a few times just to like kind of like pick up on anything if I didn't think,
Cool.
but I enjoyed them all.
I like
Um,
the fish tanks reference. It's true that that was a strange component. We tried a bunch of stuff for that one that we didn't end up using, like me like being pushed really quickly in like an office chair to like cut across the camera. But like when we looked back at it, we were like, why does this look like a fucking JC Penney commercial? So
JC
like
Penney's.
that's not going in the video.
Shout out to one of my first employers.
Oh yeah, true.
Literally, that's where Sam and I met, was at JCPenney.
Oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah.
I love that there's actually like JC Penney lore that
Yeah.
comes up.
So next thing I was going to talk about was touring for you, and I wanted to
Mm,
start out with the Australian stuff. So like I know, and I don't know if I'm gonna mispronounce her name, but Harmony Byrne.
yep, perfect.
Okay, so you toured with her, and that sounded like it was like a coastal. You kind of like went along the coast
Hmm.
kind of tour.
Yeah, which is pretty much like all Australian tours to some extent, because
Uh,
like basically all the cities are just on the coast for the most part. Um, but yeah, Harmony's actually a really good old friend of mine, like one of my first friends in Melbourne, and she's absolutely incredible. She's one of those people that like every time you see her play, you're like, I feel like I'm having a spiritual transmission.
Yeah.
Um, which is, it's pretty incredible to get to see that every night. So we had quite a bit of fun with that. But yeah, I love touring. Like it's completely like the way that we do it is just so low budget and so just like, we're camping, we're like crashing on friends' couches, like just trying
Mhm.
to do it in a way that's actually feasible. Cause I think touring is just like so prohibitively expensive for so many bands and like, you could just like lose money and spend all that time
Yeah.
doing this. So I think we try to just like have as much fun as we can with it. And the fact that we're all really close friends makes that pretty easy.
It makes it, yeah, a fun, enjoyable time, so it doesn't feel like you're, like, having to work too hard, I guess.
Exactly.
Um, so then I know you came back and you've played shows 2 different times? If I might be misremembering, but 2
Yeah.
different times in Chicago?
Yeah, well, in
And you're
Chicago, I like the first like run of shows essentially was over summer, and that was just like with with no drums, no kind of rhythm section. It was just me and my friend Marcus Darling on synth, and then like in Chicago. So that first one was at a festival called Postdoc, and then the Chicago show was me and Danny Cohen on guitar, who played in my band this last time as well, and Marcus. So then after that first couple shows. I had met
was that the
some
Sleeping Village
other
one?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I like through those, especially this festival postdoc, I just like met some really awesome musicians at that and also like some old friends and whatnot. And basically just yeah, was like approached by people kind of just being like, hey, if you ever need a bassist or if you ever need a drummer. And I was sort of just like, yeah, I mean, honestly, I might. I think I'll
Hmm.
possibly take you up on that. So then when I knew I was going to be coming back for like a little bit over winter. And I was like, I'm just gonna do it. Like the thing that I always thought would be a pain in the ass, which is essentially like putting together another live show because it took a long
Mhm.
time to like get this one to where I want it to be in Australia. Um, but I was just like, I'm just gonna do it because I trust that like if I get a sick group of musicians who are all really like down, it's gonna sound cool. And also like there was so much learning in the first like year of doing this project that it was so much easier to pick up the set with a new group and just be like it pretty much sounded good. We only practiced like twice before those shows with the full
Yeah,
band.
it sounded good. Yeah, that
Thank
was the
you.
one that I made it to, and so I was gonna ask my next question was gonna be how many times did you guys practice beforehand, but I think
Yeah, two.
everybody
And
seemed like they were
they
on it.
were pretty short, like pretty short practices. Like I mean, I got really lucky and just had this amazing group of musicians who all happened to be like total legends and sweethearts. Um, and yeah, I just like learned the material really well, but also just brought like their flair to it and were super super fun to play with and um made it really really not stressful because sometimes like putting together something from scratch and then being like, oh god, there's not that much time and we're about to be in front of everyone I know in Chicago, like, but I think that just goes to show how much I like really trusted them because I
Yeah.
felt like yeah, we can do this in two sittings and it'll sound cool.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I might have misheard, but, like, bringing it back to the beginning of the conversation, did you
Mm.
know maybe the guitarist from School of Rock
Yeah.
or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Danny was, like, an old friend from School of Rock who I literally knew when I was, yeah, like, 11 or something,
yeah, that's
and
awesome.
yeah, I'm so glad that, like, because he actually hit me up just by following what I was posting on Instagram, and was just like, "Hey, if you're ever looking for, like, a band to tee up in Chicago, like, I'm super down." And he
Mm,
was such an MVP because he's, like, simultaneously an insane guitarist and an insane keyboard player and has like synths
yeah,
and like I don't know if you noticed his crazy setup, but it was like it's complicated, man. Like there's a lot going on. So he really like brings a ton of the tones and textures.
like, took it and
Sorry,
made
my
it his
creaky
own and was
chair.
like, I hope you're
Yeah,
good.
and just like found the tones that I had done on the recordings and like found a way to replicate them in a really cool way.
Mhm.
But yeah, interestingly, that Chicago show was that was just a really weird night too because of getting food poisoning that morning.
Yeah.
and being like basically just on the brink of death. But then being like, all right, I'm just gonna let music be my medicine. And it's true that it really is. So
Yeah,
there it
and
is
I
working.
think yeah, you got to play with, or, sing with your sister, Annie, too,
Yeah,
which
that
had
was
to been
awesome.
kinda cool.
It was so cool,
Yeah.
and I definitely hope to do more of that in the future, like, especially in Chicago, just I don't know, like, bringing her up, bringing, like, other friends up. I just it's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. Do you prefer to play, a venue or a festival? Like, do you have, like, a preference?
I mean, I think festivals are particularly fun because you get to also, like, hang out with other musicians and bands and stuff, and there's just less pressure to kind of get people in the door. However, there
Mhm.
is something really beautiful about like a hometown show or like a headline show, even in Melbourne, where I've put in a ton of work to kind of get all my friends and people there. And I'm just playing to a room that I can see like so much of my community in one place, and they're there
Mhm.
for me and the band. But like they're there to support this versus like just being at a show where like you don't know that many people. Both
Yeah.
have their ups their upsides and downsides, but, like, I think being in a room where you, like, really know everyone is also really beautiful because 'cause you're kinda just, like, talking to your friends,
Yeah.
while you're on
Yeah, for
stage.
sure. We'll exclude the Chicago shows just because we don't wanna offend any friends or family, but do you have a favorite show you've played?
I love that. Um, One of my favorite shows probably was the Circles single launch in Melbourne, like, right before I came back in November, because it was at, like, one of my favorite venues, Northgate Social Club, which has, like, amazing sound, and it was, like, on the bigger side for the stages that we've played on,
Mhm.
and I just felt like we were just on. I think for me, like, favorite shows are often shows where, like, I'm feeling the best about,
What you're
like,
putting
the
out.
cohesion and how it's sounding, and yeah, like, I'm in a good headspace, and I'm feeling loose, and I've, like, channeled the energy I want for that show, and I've done my warm-ups and whatever, so I think that for sure, but, I don't know, like, we've honestly played so many fun shows. I really like the shows where we just, like, play out of town at just, like, a kinda DIY type thing, like, even actually, the show we played in Milwaukee with the, like, US band was so
Yeah.
fun. They had this crazy, like, liquid light show thing behind us that took up the whole wall. It was, like, these 3, like, guys doing psychedelic shit with, like, oil and water and projections and whatever, and it was
Oh,
just,
they
like,
were
this
doing the live? Like, they were projecting
live.
it live?
Yeah, it
Wow.
was so cool, but and then, like, you're not even on a stage, you're just kinda, like, surrounded by people, and they were all just, like, going ham, and that was really fun. Like,
Yeah.
when you're in a spot where people like, the crowd is really letting loose, that's really fun.
Yeah. I like that. That it sounds like a cool, concept. I've seen that, I feel like, but never live like that.
Yeah, it's actually really cool to watch, like, what they're actually doing, it's pretty trippy.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to, like, comment on is, when I was looking through your stuff on Spotify, there's, like, the Spotify clips, and I had never
Oh,
seen this
yeah.
before, but
I know.
you you
I
took
have a
advantage.
few on there.
I probably don't look that hard, to be honest, but, like, I
Yeah.
noticed you were able to describe, like, what the song was about, like, where your headspace was when you were creating it, and I thought that was, like, pretty cool concept.
Cool. That's good to know that, like, someone's out there actually, like, watching those. To be honest, I feel like we get a lot of emails and shit from Spotify for artists when a new feature is available, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Try making clips," and I was kinda just like, "Alright, fuck it, I'll try," because then I can just reuse them on Instagram or something, but it is sort of you don't have a lot of time. I think you get, like, 30 seconds
Mhm.
to like, that's the longest thing you can upload. But I was like,
Yeah.
this is potential like, you never know who's listening and is interested enough to, like, go to your actual profile and, like, learn more, and it's kind of just a way to, like, connect with potential listeners. So I don't know if I'll, like, do it for every song, but
Yeah.
when I can be bothered and, like, remember to,
Yeah.
I'll
No,
maybe
that's
do
cool.
it.
It was just cool 'cause I've never seen it before, and I think it would be
Yeah,
beneficial
pretty
for
new.
other artists to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
gives you
and
some
I know you
backstory.
posted we were just talking about the cool things that Spotify offers, but I know there's a lot of issues with Spotify. But I
Yeah.
saw you post the other day about, like, deleting the stats and stuff, and I
Oh,
I was just
yeah.
curious about that. What that
I just I've been in like a weird, I don't even want to call it a battle because I think like it's actually led me to some really important insights and realizations. But Spotify is kind of just this like giant conglomerate company thing that like we don't really have any power against if anything goes wrong or like you feel that you are being like unfairly treated. So yeah, they basically just kind of deleted a shitload of streams for me like 3 times.
Mm,
And they can do that for a number of reasons, but they don't actually have to give you any reason as to why. Like it can be from like, oh, we've detected like suspicious activity or like some of these playlists were like accepting payment or whatever. But like the thing is, a lot of this stuff, like they're using algorithms and bots to figure out and then like aren't really verifying and then it's just gone.
there's
And they're
no way to
definitely,
appeal.
yeah, there's no way to appeal. And I think the first time it happened, I was sort of just like, whoa. Like as an indie artist, this is kind of just a big hit. And
Hmm.
I think, people do to some extent maybe look at your stats if you're like emailing bookers and linking them to your Spotify and they're like, oh, this song has been listened to like 100,000 times, whatever that like says something to them, I guess. But I think the last time that it happened, it just really clicked into place, like the deep reality of like, this shit's outside my control.
Hmm.
I do not want to be like putting my mental health or how I feel about my project into the hands of these companies and their data. And particularly given that it's so manipulated and so beyond my control that
Yeah.
like just getting back to why the fuck I'm really doing this, which is because I love music and connecting with people over music. And as much as it's cool to be validated through like your data, I'm just really trying not to like ride the highs or the lows because I feel like if you're
Hmm.
going to ride the highs, then you kind of have to ride the lows. So I'm just trying to stay like equanimous with it all and be like, all right, it's cool if there's validation, but also it's cool if like people aren't listening to it and fuck it. Like I'm making it because I want to.
Yeah. And I like it. And that might be the answer to my next question. But I was going to ask
Mm.
if you have a new or a young artist that's coming up, maybe what would be like your biggest tip for them?
I mean, I don't know. It feels funny like giving that advice because I haven't really been in the industry for that long, but I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I definitely I think that it's easier said than done because I think in my first like year of doing this, I already felt like that was the right approach, but there was still this like very striving part of me that like was really wanting to be validated, just
Hmm.
to kind of put some more wind under my wings and just be like, yeah, like you can do this. But now, like, I feel validated enough to know that, like, if I want to do this, I can do this. But I don't want to be riding on that for my sense of confidence with this project. And I think just the more that you can be like self-sufficient in your own like ability to feel worthy, like you deserve to be making this, you deserve to be spending time on this and putting it out into the world, then the better placed you're going to be to actually like make art and not go crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't
Yeah.
know. I guess
That's
that's
good.
pretty much it.
No, that's good. That's beautiful. So what's next? I know we've kind of hinted on this, but what's next for Milou Moon? Like, what do you got coming down?
Couple things. It's been a pretty busy period. Well, we're releasing a single in 10 days actually called Subarosa. First song I'll be releasing in French, which has been like a fun avenue of exploration for me recently. Which is partly inspired by obviously the fact that I'm French, but like bands who do this kind of like ethereal psychedelic shit in French, like Air and Melody's Echo Chamber are two that I really love. Um, and then with that, we're gonna go play a couple shows up in Sydney and Wollongong, which are like pretty close to each other for the first time, which would be sweet. And
Hmm.
then the following month, we're doing a tour with this band Deep Sea Arcade that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And they are like starting to release singles for an album that was produced by Jay Watson, who's like one of the guys in the Tame Impala live band, and his project is Gum, and it's like very sort of Aussie psych rock legend. So their new music is fucking awesome. So like, it's pretty cool to be supporting them.
Yeah.
And then yeah, we're kind of just gonna be releasing like another single probably in April, and just trying to. I think we want to make like a sick live video of like playing the whole EP somewhere cool.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, the EP is gonna be coming out probably in like June, and on vinyl as well. Although I think we're gonna do this thing where we actually release the vinyl before all the tracks are released. So if you get the vinyl, you can hear unreleased tracks. So I
Yeah.
think we're gonna try to have the vinyl ready like for the Deep Sea Arcade tour. And then it's like,
That'd
well,
be cool.
the only way you can hear these songs is get the record, which would be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I've never really thought to do that, but I kind of like it.
Yeah. I like it
That's
too.
one
I
way
mean,
to
yeah,
get
there's a
around
few.
Spotify.
Yeah. There's a few artists out there that, yeah, they like, I've seen them, they won't release it on Spotify. Like they'll release it initially on Bandcamp. And so like
Mm,
you have to purchase
yeah,
the album digitally or buy the physical media and then you get the digital. But
smart.
yeah, they'll do like a release day is April for Bandcamp and then not until July or, whatever
Yeah.
for
And it's
Spotify.
kind of like go for it because it's one of the only ways you can actually like make money off your music.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. All right. So where can people find you?
I think the place that I post the most is Instagram, and that's Milou Milou Moon Moon underscore. That's definitely the most like up to date. I had like a TikTok for a while, and then I was like, this is too fucking much. Like,
Yeah,
I can't
I
do
agree.
this.
Yeah.
um, and then yeah, like Spotify as well. We're on there, and it's always cool to like follow and whatnot, because then you get notified with new music. Which yeah, there will be a bunch coming up. So those are the two places I would say like follow along, and I'll be sharing stuff.
Yeah. And I will have your Instagram handle in the description and then also on the Instagram post, obviously. And
Dope.
I know you can pre-save the newest
Yeah.
Superosa track. So
Yeah.
if you hear this, make sure you go do that. Get those
Yeah.
numbers
Yeah.
up, even though they don't really matter.
I know, I know. It's so true. It's like the constant like fight between like, help us out with this stats based thing, but also like fuck the stats and fuck all these
Yeah,
companies.
I get you. I get you. All right. So before we get to the outro questions, is there anything else you'd like to say or add?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like I've been yammering on, so I'm
No, I
sure
like it.
I'll
I like it.
I'm sure I'll have plenty more to say in the outro questions.
Yeah. No, you're good. All right. So we'll go ahead and start. 5 questions. First one, favorite beverage.
Well,
Doesn't have to be
probably like
alcoholic or anything.
I was gonna say kombucha. I feel like that's probably my go-to like fizzy beverage, but
Are
like
you a
obviously a
like
cold beer
plain
is
or
great.
yeah,
I think in the States, I go GT Dave's, and like pretty much anything he makes is delicious. The plain one is really good, but I usually have like the ginger one with like pepper. It's
yeah.
like spicy and like
Oh,
tangy. It's
I
really
haven't had
fucking
that one.
good. Yeah, I love
It's awesome.
spice. Like I love just kind of yeah, spicy, tangy. Yeah, I'll
I'll
back
be on
that
the
answer.
lookout. Yeah. All right. Number 2, a song everyone should listen to.
Ooh,
And
I've
this
been
can
listening
be
to
one of yours or it can be like your favorite song or a friend you want to put on, like whatever you wanted to make it.
oh, I just honestly the first thing that popped into my head was I mean, obviously it'd be cool if you go and listen to my music, whoever is listening to this, but I've been loving this dude, Sam Evian, and he has this record called um Time to Melt that has like just been on repeat for me. I mean, this is actually like not just a song, but him and then his partner, Hannah Cohen, who I like mentioned in the intro, I've just been like rinsing their music recently. Her record Welcome Home and his record Time to Melt. So that's not actually a song, that's two full albums. So it's kind of cheating. But
I do need a
actually,
song though.
one song. All right, go Never Know by Sam Evian.
Never know.
That
All right,
track
I got it.
is, yeah,
I
very,
make
very
I
fucking good.
I have a Spotify playlist where I put everyone's answer on it just because
Okay,
it's
dope.
got a good
I love
diverse
that.
mix to it.
Cool. I'm gonna
So
go check it out.
we'll get that one on there.
I'm sure that the rest
Uh,
of the day I'll be like coming up with other songs and be like, oh
yeah,
fuck, I could have said that one too. But nah, Never Know is like it's definitely one of my favorite songs.
I like it. Number 3, favorite concert you've been to?
Ooh, oh my God. I've been to so many good shows. I feel
Since this
like
isn't a visual medium, I have to tell you that she, like, put her hands to her face, like, gasp, like, "What am I gonna say?"
Honestly, just I'm going with just first thing that pops into my head with this kind of thing, and I'm just remembering seeing Outkast at Lollapalooza when I was, like, 17 or something,
Yeah.
and I like, you know how, they do the fireworks at Navy Pier
Yeah, yeah.
every, like, Saturday or whatever? It happened to be Saturday, and just as they started playing Spodio Dopalicious, which is, like, one of my favorite songs of all time and was my alarm for, like, 2 years, all these fireworks started going off, like, right behind the stage. It actually just, like, blew my mind, and they were incredible, and yeah. But I've
I
seen
love
so
that.
many shows, it's actually crazy.
Yeah, no, but I love so usually when people answer, I'm kinda having to be like, "Well, what made it so special?" But I'm glad you just, like, went
Yeah.
with it. That was
Oh,
good.
yeah. I'm like that I have such a clear image of that, like, "Du-du-du-du-du, du-du-du-du-du," and there's just, like, all these fireworks going off everywhere, and of course, like, me and my friends were probably baked as hell, just, like, looking at each other like, "What the fuck? Did they plan this? Like, how is this happening?" But no, I'm pretty sure it's just the Navy Pier fireworks, so that was dope.
Good. Alright, number 4, favorite place to go out and have a drink?
I'm gonna say in Melbourne, one of my favorite places to go is this bar called Capers that's like really close to where I live and where all my friends live pretty much. And it's like kind of Greek themed, but our friend owns it and it's super like cute and trendy and they do a really delicious Negroni and they've got a great
Mm,
back patio and yeah, it's just one of the like quintessential kind of like Melbourne bars in my mind.
love it, and the Negroni for the win.
Yeah, I love a Negroni.
Alright, number 5, and the last question. What's something you listen to that people may not expect?
Ooh. I almost mentioned them before when we were talking about musical influences, but then I'm like, I'm not really influenced by them, but one of my, like, earliest deep obsessions was Panic at the Disco, and actually it was my first concert.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
it
love it.
was pretty wild. It was, like, when they were touring with that album, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, and basically had, like, a full circus on stage of, like, contortionists and, like, stilts people and, like, fire breathers. It was actually insane.
That would be pretty crazy for your first
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, it was pretty dope, and I then went and saw them, like, 3 more times on that same tour, but,
Was that the
yeah.
United Center or something?
No, actually, that was, like, back in the day where they were, like, not that big yet, and I think it was at the old, was it Congress? That
Congress Theater?
like yeah, it
Or
was at
the
Congress before
on
they closed it
Milwaukee?
down for being too ratchet.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
went to a farmer's market there, and it was pretty ratchet then, so I can only imagine.
Oh my god, I didn't know they were running farmers markets there, that's hilarious. I
This is
like
a long time
that
ago,
was
long time.
that was the place that we would go in high school to see, like, dubstep concerts, and it was just, like, so janky.
That's hilarious. Alright, well, I really appreciate you taking the time again. I know we're on, like, a weird time lapse with you being over on the other side of the world, but,
It's honestly
thank
very
you.
chill. It's like 2 p.m. here, so I'm
Yeah,
chilling.
perfect. Alright, well, until, next episode, listen to some new music and drink some new beer. Cheers.
Oh, no.